Hey everyone, I'm Chris Ronzio, and this is the fourth episode of the Organized Chaos Show. If you've been watching for a little bit, you know that Organized Chaos is a throwback to when I was doing full-time operations consulting. And now with running Trainual, I don't have a chance to do that so frequently. So we made this show specifically so I could talk to other awesome entrepreneurs about what they're doing to grow their businesses, what challenges they're facing as they scale. And today we're talking to Ben. Ben is from a company called Joybyte. Ben, what does your company do?
We do custom software design and development, custom websites, and we do brand development and strategy.
Awesome. So is it kind of like an agency, a development shop? What category would you put it under?
It's a little bit of both, actually. It's kind of a hybrid between the two. We emerged as an agency first, and then we started taking on more and more development projects and built out our custom software development arm. So at this point, we kind of feel like a bit of a two-headed monster with the two different sides of the business.
It's funny. I did the same thing with my consulting firm because we'd go in and we'd talk about process and we'd map out these workflows. And then we dipped our toe into development and said, well, let's hire a freelance developer to, make some little application or connect the dots between two platforms. And then that turned into, well, we could do this custom database table. And so I totally see how you can go down that path. Where are you based?
We're based in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay. And how big's the team?
We have 25 people in-house, and then we have a nearshore development partner that has up to 25 developers that are working with us at any given time.
Awesome. Well, congrats. How long have you been doing this?
7 years.
That's awesome. So you passed isn't it like 5 years that that like 80% of businesses fail? So you're already past that.
Yes.
So you've probably got a lot of tips and lessons for other people that are just getting started. I mean, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced to get to this point?
Well, I think that one of the biggest challenges is just going from being an individual that was really talented doing these types of projects and
delivering at a certain level of service and then getting to a point where I started having to scale a team and having to have my team replicate those solutions and those same outcomes for me, and getting other people to care as much or to serve your customers the same way that you would yourself was probably the biggest challenge. And so for several years it really became an effort of building standards, processes, culture, values, and those parts of a business that would help scale my unique approach.
Nice. Okay. So, it's funny. I've found that when you hire the right people, they care more than you do. They like whatever area of the business they're working on, they are so specialized that they just can put more attention to that. Did you start out as a developer, or what's your background?
Yeah, my background is in marketing and design. So I went to school for both marketing and graphic design, and in the process learned how to program and was building my own websites. And so for me, I was able to really take a client through the branding process into the digital design process, and then ultimately develop their end website. And then we've just expanded in the complexity of our development services. So I find myself now in a position where, we've got incredibly talented programmers that know far more about programming than I will ever be able to learn on my own. And so it's its own challenge, is managing incredibly talented people in fields that are not necessarily your direct expertise.
Yeah, last week, actually, I had someone on that had 75 team members, and that was exactly what we talked about, is how do you train for a position that you know nothing about? How do you know what's good or not? So it's definitely a challenge. Anybody watching can check out episode 3 to dig more into that. So as you're growing the business, you said you're at 25 people today. What's your vision for the next couple of years?
Well, our vision is that we want to be able to continue to build our team in-house. We want to ultimately take on and build our own development team in Mexico, where we can control the entire recruiting process. And we really have started to find that our company has excelled the most when we are working with mid-size enterprise clients. And so we're really looking at building our processes and our expertise to serve that level of client, and then even go as far as providing staff augmentation services for them.
Got it. Okay. So the questions that you put in advance were a little bit about just building the teams and how do you, from a process standpoint, make sure that you're finding the right people and putting them in the right seats. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
So why don't you tee up the issue for anyone that's watching?
Yeah, so I think it's really difficult. I think the recruiting process can be challenging. You're putting out a basic job description. You're putting your expectations for the role, the accountabilities, and the proficiencies that you're hoping to hire for. We find that we get a lot of very aligned applicants that fit those roles. So the process of sorting through that and really narrowing it down and trying to find the right fit, not just from a culture perspective, but from an actual skill perspective. And ultimately, you know, we've gone through good hires and bad hires. And as a small business, what's always really challenging is putting the wrong person in the company, and then depending on them and losing the time to train that person, and then ultimately get to a point where you realize it's not a good fit. It's been a really big hit for us every time we've had that happen, and we kind of have to go back and start over and bring in the right people.
Yeah, there's actually some stats around this. So I have this slide in a presentation I do that says the Department of Labor in the U.S. pegged this as 30% of someone's annual salary is what the cost to the business is if they don't work out. And that's just in terms of the time that you invested in the person, the time to get them out of there, get the lost productivity from whoever they were working with, the new person that you've got to backfill that role with. So it's a big expense. And I've seen that fact represented in a few ways. So maybe what would be helpful is, if for anyone watching, is why don't we talk through just the stages of a recruiting process? And there's probably some best practices you've got that have worked, and I'll just interject some of the things that we do and that I know other companies have done. So why don't we start from the very top, just kind of brainstorming the role. How do you go about that from the inception of we need to hire this position?
Well, at this stage, we're pretty clear about our organizational chart, and we are following a lot of the EOS principles, and so we do know very clearly when we have a need on the team, because we have a future vision of what our team should look like as we start to take on more business, and we get those additional layers of management and accountability as we grow. So we have a really good way of at least identifying that we will project having a need in this particular area, or we currently have a need in a specific area. And for us, that just comes from a very clear vision about what kind of service we want to be able to provide to our customer, because we're in the business of selling time, essentially. Whether we're building products, we're building solutions for them, but ultimately we're just selling a resource pool to a customer and managing that resource pool to get the right output for them. So that's our big thing, is we know we are pretty clear about the roles that it's going to take to be successful in delivering the level of service that we want to deliver, and carving out the responsibilities for that given role.
So I'll share kind of how we've done it, especially when you're creating a role for the first time. It can be a little vague or ambiguous when you're trying to figure out what is the title, what are the things they're going to do. So we do the same thing with the org chart planning you mentioned. And a cool tip for everyone is I think you should try to do a org chart for the end of this year, for the end of next year, and for 3 years out. Because if you can see sort of the trajectory that the business is going on, you'll know not to hire some position that's really short-sighted when that same role needs to grow into this broader set of responsibilities next year. So sometimes you want to hire for the thing you're going to need in 2 years or 3 years instead of just the ordering snacks or whatever the thing is today, right? It's funny, we're doing that right now with bringing on an office admin, because it's such a vague thing. And you think, is this a receptionist? Is it an office admin? Is it an executive assistant? Is it are they helping with some of our people operations? And so we've had to be going through this exercise of figuring out what's the org chart look like, and how does this person carry from today through the next 3 years? So that org chart thing is the first great tip. The next thing we've done is we will dig around on LinkedIn and search different titles, and we'll look at dozens of profiles to see how people talk about the job that they do, what skills that they list, because sometimes we'll learn something from someone's bio on LinkedIn that we hadn't even thought to put in the job description, but it's really smart. And so we sort of crowdsource our job descriptions by looking at, LinkedIn profiles, by looking at other people's job descriptions on Indeed or wherever they post them. And from that, we're able to sort of narrow down to how to make ours different, exactly what ours is supposed to do. So getting that job description is important. But then the next thing is we infuse tons of culture and fun into our job descriptions, because beyond just attracting people with the right title or the right experience, we want from the highest level people to be self-selecting themselves based on the style of our posting. I don't know if you do something similar.
No, I think that's an area that we could do a lot better, and actually is letting some of the culture come through and help that filter it down for us. Like you said, I think a lot of times we're so focused on the skill set that we're looking for that we're not being critical enough about the type of personality.
Yeah. And so the skills and the culture and all that, there's so many touch points through the recruiting and the interview process to weed people out and to figure out if they're the right fit. But I think the job description is your first introduction to skills and culture and everything. It's where you want to throw everything in and say, here's who we are as a company. And so anyone can look at our job posting. I think it's just jobs.trainual.com or trainual.com/jobs. You can read through the ones that we have. But we, first of all, we talk about where we're headed as a company, what category we're building, how we're uniquely positioned in the market. We talk about our recent fundraise. We talk about how quickly we're growing, how many positions we're adding, because we want people to have that context of, do they like working at a small company? Do they like working at a company where there's frequent change? Do they like working at, in a really tech oriented type of business? And so we set that stage up front. And then we put all the skills stuff, like you should be able to do this and this and this. You should want to learn to do this and this and this, because that speaks to what level of experience they're at. We want to make sure that they're not underwhelmed by the role when they come in or overwhelmed by the role. So we try to anchor them to, like, here's what you know how to do. Here's what you want to learn how to do. Here's the path you should be on. And then we get really into the culture, and we put all of our different values and what they mean. We put a link to a video that our, video team made to say, like, here's 3 minutes of actually what it is like to work at Trainual, interviews with employees. And so by the time people apply, you can totally tell if somebody is really bought into the job and the culture, or if someone's just applying to 100 places. And so that makes the screening process up front really easy. So that's what we do with job description. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think that's incredibly powerful, especially given the video and some of the other elements that you're delivering there that will also, I assume, set you guys apart too, and kind of build some value around like how you guys approach running your business. So it's super helpful.
Awesome. All right. So then the next thing we do is, even to apply, there's a set of questions they have to fill out, so it's not a one-click apply sort of thing. And we'll change this job by job to say, tell us how you would approach this particular problem, or pick one of our 6 values and tell us a story about why it resonates with you. Or, and it doesn't have to be anything that's a real high bar. But again, it's a screening tool to say, do you really want to work at Trainual, or are you just looking for a job? And that's important to us, that they put some thought into that. This isn't anywhere on the application, but if anyone's watching this that's trying to apply, something I like a lot is when somebody has really done their homework and they say, like, hey, I read this article, or I talked to this person that is a warm contact of yours, or, I've got some connection into why I'm interested beyond just my application. That's really important to me. And if somebody messages me on LinkedIn or Instagram and sends a private thing to say, like, hey, I just want to let you know, I found your company like this, I applied, I'm super excited, and I hope I get a chance to meet you, or something like that, again, they rise to the top in terms of our interview process. So I guess that's more of a tip for people applying to roles than than us, but maybe just it's something you put some weight into.
Yeah, something you recognize.
Yeah. Do you use any kind of tech systems for your recruiting and candidate tracking?
No.
So this is something that even if you're hiring one person a year, I recommend you have some kind of sequence. And I used to use Trello, which is free, and it's just got this list-based system where you can have stages to say, here's sourced candidates that like I've reached out to on LinkedIn. Here's people that have actually applied. Here's people that I've done a phone screen with. Here's people that I've invited to come to an in-person interview. Here's people that we're doing some like skills-based tests with. Here's people we've sent an offer to, and then here's like archived or hired. And that state, whatever 7-8 step process is something that I think everyone should have some procedure for. Because at any stage of your business, you're going to be meeting people that could be great hires down the road for you. You might meet someone at a networking event or at a coffee shop or at a wedding or whatever, and you're like, this person's awesome, and I'm not hiring a marketing role today, but I want to keep them on my list of like cool candidates that I want to reach out to. And it just reminds you to engage with those people. And then if you are actively hiring, you use all the other stages to take people through, the sequence. So if you're not using Trello, or maybe you're doing something that's you're hiring more frequently, you're going to use an applicant tracking system, an ATS it's called. We use a tool called Lever. There's a lot of these out there though. We've used in the past one called Breezy, one called Workable. There's a lot of these tools, but the benefit of them, think of it as like a CRM for hiring. So they've got pre-built templates to send people, like if they had a really crappy interview and you're like, I'm sorry, but we're gonna end things here, or just setting appointments that link into your calendar, leaving feedback and asking your team for feedback when they've also interviewed the person. I read this book called Who I think it's by Jeff Smart. Have you heard of that? Amazing book. I did the audio book while I was running, but it was really helpful in terms of just this whole recruiting and hiring process, the screening interviews, the in-person interviews, the types of questions to ask. One of the things I found myself doing when it was just me running the process is I was the sales guy. I'm like so used to selling customers and doing presentations, and I want to close the deal. And so everyone that I'd meet with, I'd be just convincing them how amazing it was to work here. And then sometimes I would close the wrong person. I'm looking for ways to get the deal done and not the reverse, which is like devil's advocate of why shouldn't they work here? So one of the big things for me was putting other people from the company earlier in the hiring process so that I don't just become this cheerleader for a person that I had like a really fun conversation with.
That's an extremely valuable piece of advice right there. I think that's the same thing I've run into over the history here, is feeling that need to sell the business to somebody else and just get lost in the fact that they really are the one that we're evaluating to see if they're a good fit for us.
Yeah. So it's important to sell the business, but that's the last step.
Yeah.
So now I'm the last interview in the process. And if they make it to the last interview, they've already been vetted for culture and skills and reference checked, and their, comp is in the right range. And by the time they get to me, I'm like, here's why you should pick us instead of all the other offers that you probably have because you're so awesome, and so then it is a sales thing. But if you start with selling people up front, then you kind of get attached to trying to get this person hired, even if they're not the right fit.
Right.
All right. So I threw out a ton of stuff there, but we kind of skipped over like the interview process. So why don't you talk about, how do you do this now? Do you do screening interviews, in-person interviews, any kind of tests?
Yeah, so depending on the role, so it depends on what the skill set that we're looking for is. We do a series. We kind of, as you mentioned, we started with a very simple interview process where it was me involved in the first round. Now we have pulled me a little bit further back on that. So depending on which role it is, we'll have the direct manager or department manager of that area perform the first round interview. But
Mhm.
before we've even gotten there, of course, we go through and try to screen all the applicants that we have that came in, just reviewing their resumes and really looking at their skills and their history, and see if there's anybody that stands out from that process. We try to shorten that up as much as possible, although I think that's an area we could do better at. But the department head will sit down and have a meeting with that person and ask them a series of questions. If they're satisfied and feel like they're a good fit, then they'll go into a skill test with us, whether that's a programming test. But what we like to do is we like to do that with them right there on the spot. We typically will throw a problem on the table, and that may be a programming level problem, that may be a logic-based problem or a marketing problem, but we'll throw the issue on the table, and we like to collaborate with them through solving that problem, because we really want to look at how do they work. And it's not always just a question for us of, do you have the skill to do this? It's more so, how will we work together, right? If we're going to take you on our team. And so that really helps us a lot. And it also disarms that process a little bit, I think, is that we're willing to make it more collaborative with them.
Yeah.
And for us, we just gain a ton of insight through that process.
Yeah.
So once they've gotten through that, we ultimately have a very short list at that point. And that's where I'd like to sit and have a conversation with them, and then really understand if I feel like they're a strong culture fit for the vision of the company. And ultimately, if I give it the green light, then we move forward.
Yeah. So many good takeaways there, but we've done it both ways with the in-person collaboration and the take home project or homework. And what I think is great about the in-person scenario is usually that's a second in-person interview that we do, that where we'll bring a problem to the table that's an active issue that we're trying to work through. And so in one case, it was like an influencer proposal that we were trying to do a marketing deal with, and we sat there as a team with this person interviewing and scrolled through to get their feedback on the proposal. And it was really insightful to hear how they thought about the issue, how they agreed or disagreed with other members across the table. So I think that's powerful. But the at-home projects are something we do for everyone now. So at kind of the middle stage, so first we'll do a screening interview just to make sure there's no red flags and some basic reference checks. And then we'll do the in-person interview with kind of a panel of people we bring in. We have meet a few people, and then we do a homework assignment after that that's actually doing some skills testing. So for developers, it is a development test, but for other positions, it's it could be a scenario, and we're asking them like how they'd respond, or write a couple emails and how would you do this. Or it could be a financial project where they're making a spreadsheet, or it just depends on the role. But they take that and their next interview is presenting that back to us. And so then we can see how they went about the problem, how strategic they were in thinking about it, or like an actual example of their work, which is really powerful, because then you don't hire someone and cross your fingers that they know how to do the thing that they said they knew how to do. You're testing them up front. And, there's so many companies I've talked to that get surprised with bad performance once you're paying the person. And it's like test driving a car or something. Like, you've got to have at least an example of, I like this is the quality I'm looking for.
Yep.
So it sounds like you do that too. And then the other big thing we do is we develop a scorecard for every position. And it's very simple. It's like a little table, but we always have our 6 core values on there. And then we've got a handful of other things that relate to competencies for the role. And so everyone that's interviewing the person is evaluating on those 10 things to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how great of a fit are they across these values, and how competent do they seem across the things we need for this role. And so that adds kind of a quantifiable element to comparing different candidates against each other.
Nice.
All right. So you've gone through the screening interviews, you've done some kind of test, and despite all of the process that it sounds like you have, there's certain people that don't work out. What do you think goes wrong, or where are you missing the mark?
I think that for us, it's been the process of kind of growth, and that we've struggled with having a rigid process for people to follow, I think. And so we put a lot into their hands, following an agile development methodology and prioritizing, discussion, conversation over written process has kind of been one of the cores to how we operate. And so I think that what ultimately we've fallen short on is probably standards and expectation management, and putting too much into the unique capabilities of our team, and relying on them to deliver that portion of the work. So I think that's for us right now, one of the big things we're really focused on is trying to, use Trainual, document process, and set some standards that are easier for people to follow. So,
all right. So not this was not a placed commercial, no, I promise. But
no.
But so another one of the things that we do that's worked really well is when someone starts, we do a welcome interview, I call it. And this is just sitting down and setting expectations with someone, verifying with them, here's why we picked you, here's why we hired you, this is what we liked in the interview process, here's what we expect of you, this is what why we're hiring this position, and what did you like about us, why did you pick us? So it's a great way to just set the foundation of continuing on from 2 or 3 weeks ago when they accepted the job. Now it's their first day. So that conversation, and then we talk about what projects or milestones or specific objectives are you going to hit in your first week, in your first 30 days, in your first 90 days. And that, I think, is a key part of this, because if someone comes in and doesn't have clear expectations, if it's just kind of like, here's your domain and go, then you can't necessarily hold them accountable to results you haven't communicated to them. And so up front, we try to come up with at least a full few bullet points of here's what we're expecting this week, this month, this quarter. Beyond that, we do 90-day check-ins with every person on the team. And that's just a process we started to really create this culture of accountability, where we say, here's what you agreed to 90 days ago. Here's how it went, either great or okay or not so great. Here's what we learned from it. And here's what the next 90 days are going to look like. And we challenge everybody to have these measurable goals, because then it keeps the conversation open, where someone doesn't get, their performance doesn't dip too bad to where it's unrecoverable. It's a forcing function for us to say, let's keep talking about this and make sure things are going well. Now, not in every case does it go well, though. Sometimes there's still hard conversations that need to happen, but at least you've got this mechanism where you're constantly communicating.
Yep, that makes sense. I think that's an area that we've really needed to improve in, is the frequency of our check-ins. We got into the habit of really getting into 6 months or even a year with a lot of people that we were getting comfortable with, and then there's just so much that can happen in that time period without that touch point.
Yeah, totally. And it's not even that you're only going to talk every 6 months or every 3 months. We use this thing. It's called Donut, I think. It's like a Slack plugin that randomly assigns groups of 2 people every week. You're paired up to meet with someone else and go grab a coffee or a donut or something like that. And so it's just a fun little thing that our head of people started. And the purpose is just to, it's to encourage the cross-department collaboration and communication, is to get people to talk to people they might not otherwise talk to. But it's also great for me, because it forces me to, go for a half-hour walk around the block with someone that I didn't have a meeting scheduled with. And it's cool, the insights I get or the things I find out about when I do those meetings.
That's awesome.
So definitely frequent communication. I remember I had my brother and I did this thing with Gary Vee last summer and went to his office. And one of the things that stood out is that he has 5-minute meetings with everyone in the company, 1,000 employees that are scheduled proactively every year, but then anyone can reach out and request one of those meetings at any time. And so it could be for the smallest thing, like they have a question for him, or they just want to get on his radar and him to know their name. Or it could be that they've got an ask, or, they're looking for a promotion, or they're, dealing with some issue and want him to know about it, or, whatever it is. But you always have that flexibility to meet with anybody at any time. And I think that is important as well, to remind people that you don't have to wait 90 days to come to talk to me. Like anytime you have something, just ping me on Slack. So another thing that you put in the survey here, we talked about kind of like the resources for, how you get guidance in your field when you grow to a certain point and maybe you're surrounded by competitors. So talk me through that problem.
Yeah, so obviously there's just rapid evolution in process and tools and in the methodologies of building software. So that's one of the areas that, we're constantly trying to get the right kind of mentorship. And we really were just me and another, and so that becomes something where we've always been trying to learn from people that are further along in the process than us. Where they feel like it's okay to share their knowledge and not feel like they're aiding a competitor, basically, that's somehow going to take their best practices and compete against them with them. So maybe, some suggestions on how we can open up the doors to, meet the right kind of people that have gone where we're trying to go, and give us some of their insights and how to do that more successfully.
Yeah. So this is a great topic. I've been a part of different groups, mastermind type groups, for years. And one of them is called EO, Entrepreneur Organization. They do a great job of creating these forum experiences, these mastermind groups, where they won't put anyone that's directly competitive in your group, but you're learning from people that are going through the same kind of business challenges. And, the same things we've been talking about here. You get experience from people at all different life cycles of their own company, on marketing or sales or hiring or HR or operations or technology, whatever it is. So I think it's really important to be in a peer group where you can get business feedback from peers. But then to your point about like the industry expertise of things that are changing in your industry, I have friends that participate in vertical specific masterminds, like agencies, but they're geographically separated in that, there's one that's in Denver and one that's in Florida and one that's in Vancouver and one that's in Boston. And they all get together a couple times a year and they do monthly Zoom calls or something like this. And so I think you shouldn't be, I guess, intimidated or scared of working with geographic, same businesses in other geographic places, because there's a lot you can learn from each other and you're never going to really touch the same customers. Now, if your customers are everywhere and you do see them as competitors, then I think you've got to sort of flip how you think about competition, because for someone doing software development with 25 employees, there's millions of customers for all of you. And so the likelihood that you're going to be competing for the same deal is so minimal compared to the massive likelihood that you're going to learn from each other. And so I think that embracing competition is a good thing. Now, specific example of this, there is a group I'm in called SaaS Academy. It's for software as a service businesses. There's 100 or a couple hundred companies in this group. People represented all over the world. 3 times a year, we get together in these in-person meetings, and then there's Zoom calls and things on a monthly basis. There was a competitor in the group that came out with a product that was very similar to the one we've offered, to the point that the screenshots looked the same. And we had customers calling us to say, like, are you working with them? Is this a white label sort of situation? Very competitive at face value. At the event, they actually put us next to each other at the same table at this learning event. And we spent 2 days talking to each other, understanding like how you're approaching the market versus how I'm approaching the market. And I left that event feeling like that person's not even a competitor. I'm glad that they're out there trying to solve the same problem for a different group of people. And so I think we can perceive people as competitors that may not end up necessarily being competitors, and that the approach to be more open and collaborative is probably the better approach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In terms of other mentors, guidance, coaches, I've always had at least a couple mentor, business type mentors. There's this site clarity.fm that I used to use, which you can find really experienced people that are willing to, jump on a paid call with you for, charge by the minute sort of thing. So I actually used that when I was just getting into writing and PR sort of stuff. I would connect with different editors to say, I've never done a guest post. Can you help me understand how this works? How do I play this game? And it was crazy. I paid maybe like $100 for a 15-minute call with someone that led to like thousands of dollars in contributed writing that got me my ink column. And so, if I never reached out to this expert to just understand how the game works, I wouldn't have ever gone down the path of being able to get, the opportunities I've had. I think you can do the same thing on LinkedIn too. You don't need necessarily a marketplace.
Right.
Clarity, you could use Upwork, but you could also just ping people on LinkedIn and say, hey, what would it cost for, I know it doesn't look like you do consulting, but what would it cost for an hour of your time to just teach me how this works, or give me some advice on what you're seeing? I did this recently at a conference I attended. There was somebody that was on this panel, and she runs like VR and augmented reality for this big Fortune 500 company. And I thought, there's an expert that I want to pick their brain for a little bit because it applies to what we're building with Trainual. And so I reached out to her. She said she's never consulted before. I said, it's fine. Here's an NDA. What do you think's fair for an hour? Like, let's just talk. And now I've got this great relationship of someone I can reach out to that, was very willing to do it. And it cost me almost nothing.
That's awesome. That's great advice.
Cool. All right. As we wrap up here, are there any other burning questions or things you want to talk about?
I think the only other thing is maybe give some of your insight on as you grew your business and as you've even consulted with other businesses, and you find a company that starts really with just one person, essentially, like what's the best advice you have for somebody who's trying to scale their team that eventually will take all these other responsibilities off of them? But in the process, you're still trying to actually deliver your service. You're still serving customers. You're still selling your service, right? You've got all these responsibilities. Like, what's your best advice for being able to still make progress on building out the infrastructure of your own business in the process of delivering those services?
All right. So this is a weird analogy, but when I was a little kid, I remember we hired a family friend to come and finish our basement. I lived on the East Coast. And so we had a just kind of like a cellar that was unfinished, and we wanted to turn it into a livable space. And so this guy came over for like 6 months on the weekends or nights or whenever he had a chance. And he would, frame out the walls and then put up drywall. And I would help him just because I was interested. I was 12 years old and I thought, like, this is fun. I want to learn to do this stuff. And every time he would come over, we would, do an area of the basement, and we'd patch things up, and we'd leave it in a place that the next day we're going to move on to something different. And it was it's weird that I'm even thinking of this, but it stood out because when you're building a business, you can get caught in doing the same thing and doing it every day. And you take on a role or a job in the business that never evolves and never changes. And when you're doing that, you're not actually building anything. You're just kind of like going through the motions. And so think about it like the physical, putting up drywall is you're closing off some area of the business, some area of the wall, so that you're not going to get back in the inside. You're not going to get back into the wires and the studs and whatever. You put the drywall up, that part's done, and then you move on to the next thing. And so I think in a business, you are, at the beginning when it's just you're doing everything, or maybe you've got freelancers or you're outsourcing some technical things or whatever, but you are responsible for everything. And as quickly as possible, you've got to identify where the drywall is that you can put up to say, I'm closing this thing off and I'm not going to do it anymore. I've handed off this responsibility or this hat, and then I'm going to move on to this other wall or this other piece of the business. And so if you've got that mentality of do this until I put the drywall up, and then do this part until I put the drywall up, and then do this, then you can step back and you've actually got something that you built. You've got this room or this building, and it's the same way. And it sounds like you've done that to an extent. You've got teams of people and department leaders that are doing this. So now you just have to, go up the stairs to the next floor and do the same thing. And you say, like, I've built this thing. Now what, now where am I putting up walls? Because there's still things that are taking your time and pulling you into the day-to-day that you just have to be methodical about putting the right box on the org chart and hiring the right person to do that. Yeah.
And also, clearly finishing off a project, you're not going to jump from, doing electrical to doing some drywall to going back to something, like make sure that you've taken the sequential steps of closing out a project that you're working on so that you can move on completely to something new. I think that's something that's great advice there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for helping me think of the analogy.
You bet.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed talking with you, Ben. It sounds like you've got a cool business. So don't hesitate to reach out anytime. And it's cool that you're using Trainual. So thank you for the support for that.
You bet.
Anything you'd like to leave people with, or a place that they can find you?
If they're looking for me, they can best communicate with us by just going to our website, joybite.com. And other than that, just keep working hard at whatever your business is, and put in the work and seek mentors like Chris and other people, and constantly stay learning, because that's how you're going to improve and go to the next level.
Awesome. Ben Gerster, thanks for coming on. Great talking with you. And we'll see you next week on Organized Chaos.